Hello, I'm Simone Smith and welcome to my presentation focusing on the writings of Simon Frith in his book Performing Rights, Chapter 13, pages 269 to 278. Frith puts forth an interesting concept in this chapter that suggests sociological approaches in academic study for music performance, production and execution through personal preference and environmental means. He considers the emotional plane in which he places alongside music, in that music is a sort of force that can overcome boundaries and resonate with the emotional sets that we as humans acquire in our cognitive abilities. He considers a range of studies and research that reinforce his arguments and considers the findings of other researchers that contribute to these ideas. The first concept of argument that he introduced in the chapter is the homological perspective, where music is studied to depict how the text and the music itself represent social relations. In contrast, Frith suggests that the focus of this study approach should be reversed, in that the depiction of social relations and popular values should be found in how music produces these values through the very act of the musical performance. Frith refers to Marxist and Weberian musicologist theories that argue that, quote, music is a form of ideological expression, not just in broad institutional terms, which is how it is played and heard, but also aesthetically, through the expressive dependence of the organising principle of the music as a structure of willed sounds on the organising principle of society as a structure of power, end quote. He goes on to reference Theo van Leeuwen's words, quote, music can be seen as an abstract representation of social organisation, as the geometry of social structure, end quote. Frith continues from Leeuwen's words that contrarily say, quote, music not only represents social relations, it also simultaneously enacts them, end quote. So using these references as a binary opposition, Frith brings the concept around to argue against these theories and concludes, quote, in examining the aesthetics of popular music, we need to reverse the usual academic argument. The question is not how a piece of music or a text reflects popular values, but how, in performance, it produces them, end quote. Further, another statement that Frith insists upon, quote, music doesn't represent values, but lives them, end quote. He uses the words of John Millard Chernoff when describing drumming in Africa. Quote, the aesthetic point is not to reflect a reality which stands behind it, but to ritualise the reality that is within it. End quote. Frith is embarking upon the very act of performance, providing the landscape for sociological academic study. Frith raises another concept to argue, quote, music constructs our sense of identity through the experience it offers to the body, time and sociability, experiences which enable us to place ourselves in imaginative cultural narratives, end quote. His point here is that both producing music and receiving it are bodily matters, and the physical element of this is that music can put us in our place, both physically and emotionally. Although Frith supports the sociological analytic approaches towards what makes a personal preference in an individual, he frequently mentions words such as emotional, feelings, and imaginative. He links the social and the emotional factors when he references the words of John Blacking, saying that regardless that the music produced is primarily due to historical circumstances, it is still the emotional sets that are rooted in our bodily selves that are mainly responsible for an individual's musical social construct. In relation to music having a cultural effect on individuals, Frith says, quote, my argument is that music only does this through impact on individuals, and that this impact is obdurately social, end quote. In relation to performance, Frith suggests that experiencing music performance, quote, offers the immediate experience of collective identity, end quote. In relation to research contribution, Frith features the study of Gina Arnold in his paper that focused on the American indie scene in the 1980s. Frith summarises her findings. Quote, "In responding to a song, a sound, we are drawn hazardously, as Arnold suggests, into affective and emotional alliances," end quote. Arnold is quoted further, quote, "Music is especially important for our sense of ourselves because of its unique emotional intensity. We absorb songs into our own lives and rhythm into our own bodies," end quote. Moreover, Finnegan's study of her hometown that Frith includes in the paper is also a social emotional angle that Frith adopts. The study showed that the town dwellers found that their identities were more comfortably executed through their choice of music as opposed to their employment. Frith comments, "It was in their musical activities that her town dwellers found their most convincing narratives. It was in their aesthetic judgments that they expressed their most deep-seated ethical views," end quote. Frith's new knowledge includes the concept of music's cultural form, the sociology of that can be associated with aesthetic theory, and the means to understand how we as individuals understand and value pop music. In using music aesthetics by way of special metaphor, Frith suggests, quote, "Music defines a space without boundaries," end quote. He insists that music is the most able cultural form that can cross all boundaries and define a place, no matter the scene or setting. His analytical suggestions are that of, quote, "ways in which we can use sociology of music as the basis of an aesthetic theory, how we can move from a description of popular music as a social institution to an understanding of how we can and do value it," end quote. He believes that an individual's personal preference, their taste, and the way that they describe music should be the basis and necessity for academic analysis. Further, his perspective of personal taste is reflected here when he says, quote, "Pop tastes do not just derive from our socially constructed identities, they also help to shape them," end quote. So for my 3 questions, I will begin with one that Frith raises himself in the paper, which I will make my first question. Question 1. Does this mean in the end that the value of popular music is simply a matter of personal preference? Okay. Question 2. In terms of sociocultural influences and personal emotional relations in music, do you agree that we identify ourselves through music we relate to? Keep in mind Frith's words that experiencing music performance, and I quote, "offers the immediate experience of collective identity," end quote. And finally, for my 3rd question, your thoughts on whether music is a production of the society the artist resides in, or the music influences the society surrounding that artist. I ask this to better understand Frith's analytical approach of understanding popular music by means of personal preference as a basis for academic study. So I will put these questions up on the forum. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to hearing your discussions on the forum. Thank you.